Hello everybody, today I'm going to be talking about how I landed my first software engineering job. And in the meantime, I've had plenty of different experiences, some consulting, various jobs, contracts, and so on. But this was the first one and probably the one closest to my heart because it really did set me off on this path. And I want to share that with you guys because I feel like a lot of people who watch this channel are sort of just getting started in their careers, just getting started with internships, and they might be at uni. There's also plenty of people who like established professionals who want to get AWS certified. So that's another sort of category of people who watch these videos. But this one is mainly for those of you who are in uni and looking to get your first internship, especially if you're doing computer science, software engineering, that kind of area. And I want to provide some tips on how I landed this, how you can do the same, and how to make the most of it as well. So let's get started. I just wanted to talk about kind of the story around how I first got this job. And it started as an internship for 6 months and then sort of became part-time work from there. And so the actual story is a bit of a fluke. So I don't want people to get the wrong impression or people to say, oh, you know, he just got lucky and so on, because I 100% believe I could replicate this, knowing what I now know and the advice I'm giving to you guys in the space of a couple of months. The real thing is, though, the particular circumstance in which I did get this job could be classified as a bit of a fluke. So I'll give you the story and you can make your own decisions here. In first year uni, so that was 3 years ago, I'm in fourth year now, I was doing my engineering degree. I'm studying engineering and commerce, and I hadn't majored in software engineering yet. During the holidays, I thought to myself, this would be kind of fun for no reason in particular. I want to learn how to make apps. And I had an Android phone at the time. And for that reason, I decided, okay, I'm going to make Android apps. So I looked up some tutorials online, and most of this stuff is all just freely available these days. I followed along with a course and sort of made my first pretty crappy Android app. And then I thought, let's make something a little bit more complex. And so I wanted to make a hangman game. That was kind of my goal for that holiday break, if we get a month off. And I was doing other things as well. I was, going camping and hanging out with friends and so on. But it was like my little professional goal for that period was I want to make a hangman game as an Android app. And around the middle of the holidays, a friend of mine said to me, hey, I'm going to this meetup tonight. It's an Android developer meetup. It's Google developer group. And you should come. And I almost went, can't really be bothered. But then I thought, well, this is actually probably going to help. There's probably going to be people I can talk to here about how to do this. So I went along to the meetup, and I'm pretty sure the two of us, myself and my friend, talked to only two people that whole night. The first was this Scandinavian guy who was a developer, and we just had a chat over pizza. And then the second was this guy named Bala, who I've since come to know as a legend among men, and you'll see why in a minute. And he sat down with us very briefly and just wanted to have an idea of what we were working on. And I said, oh yeah, I'm trying to make this hangman game. And basically our discussion went like this. He's like, oh, so you're making an Android app in Java. That's really cool. How are you doing your class model and everything like that? And I said, oh yeah, I'm not worrying too much about that. I'm just putting everything in one class. And he looks at me funny and he goes, that's not how Java works. You need to split everything up, have all the different classes call each other, instantiate, and so on. Which, I briefly heard about object-oriented programming, but like I said, I hadn't actually started doing software engineering yet, so I didn't really know. And so I said, look, can you maybe point me towards like an article I could read or something like that? He suggested some. And for the next hour, I started just reading these articles really thoroughly, experimenting with different things and trying them out on the game I was building. And I actually found that it worked and it was a lot cleaner than what I was doing previously. Not only was I only doing it in one class, I was actually doing it, I'm pretty sure, if I can remember correctly, in one method. So for anyone who's used Java before, you're probably screaming internally right now. But that's where I was at, all right? So, this is the beginning of my coding career, if you will. So an hour or two later, we were about to head off and, I built my thing and it was working. And I saw Bala over in the corner and I was kind of like, oh, let's just get home, it's late. But I also sort of thought I should show him, I should show him what his advice has helped me with. And it's helped me build this and actually make it work. So I went over to him and I said, hey, so I followed your advice And I built this and I demonstrated it to him. And he went, oh wow, yeah, you learned that really, really fast. I'm actually really impressed. You should add me on LinkedIn and we'll have a chat. You're a student, right? I said, yeah, I am. I'm doing engineering and commerce at Monash. And he's like, all right, so you're like third or fourth year or what? And I said, no, I'm actually first year. And he's like, oh, okay, well, we can probably make this work. So I actually run a startup. I'm the CTO of this startup. We're based in East Melbourne, and you should come along and have a chat and see if you maybe want to do an internship with us, do some work while you're still at uni and so on. And I thought, you know what? I wasn't planning on this, but this sounds like a really good opportunity, and I'm not going to say no to a good opportunity. And so I went along and I had a chat. I actually remember sending a couple of emails that kind of got lost in the ether, and then he finally got back to me, and about a month after our initial discussion, I went in and we met up at a cafe and just had a talk about, you know, what I might get out of this, what they might get out of this. And so they basically decided 6 months I would work 2 days a week during uni, and maybe a bit more once uni was over as an intern, and learn everything I could. Initially it was going to be an unpaid internship, which, to be honest, I'm not even sure if that's legal, but because I had had some previous experience working with the LAMP stack, so basically making PHP and HTML, CSS, JavaScript applications, I was offered 25 an hour Australian dollars, so that's about 19 US. And for me, at the time, I was like, this is great. I had previously come from a retail job where I was making minimum wage, so about probably 2/3 of what they had offered me. So I was pretty happy. To be honest, I probably would have worked there for free to start with, you know, at least for a couple of months. So they told me, we'll keep you on for 6 months, and if we like you at the end, we'll give you a bit of a raise and you can stay for as long as you like, really. So that's exactly what happened. I worked on a couple of mobile app projects in my first 6 months, probably spending around 2/3 of my time just reading tutorials and articles and experimenting with things, not really actually making any productive output. And to be honest, I was starting from lots and lots of foundational gaps in my knowledge. Like, I didn't know what Git was. My idea of version control was, if I needed to make a backup of my project, I'd copy the folder. So I look back on that and laugh, but it makes you realize as well that, you know, really everyone starts from this point. Software engineering is just made up by people, so you're not born knowing any of this. You've got to learn it, and that's what internships are for. The other thing that I picked up pretty quick was the difference between front end and back end, because I've worked with PHP where they're kind of one and the same. You know, you can make database calls from the same thing that's rendering your page. Whereas with JavaScript and Node and so on, it was completely different. So that was a really interesting idea that I got pretty quickly. Yeah, so in the first 6 months, I learned Android development, I learned a bit of React, a bit of Node, and a whole lot about the software development lifecycle. And on top of that, I learned what it was like working in an office environment, which was completely new to me. And really, it's new to anyone who hasn't done it before. So most of my peers at uni for the next few years after, until they did internships, had no idea either. I then stayed for another year after that. And in that time, I worked on Android apps, iOS apps, various things with AWS, React, Node. And because of the AWS, I found that really interesting. And so I went and got the first 4 certifications, Cloud Practitioner and the 3 Associates. I took part in hackathons, company events, gave a few presentations, and generally had a really good time where I learned heaps. Over the uni holidays, I worked full-time, and when uni went back, I worked 2 days a week. Keeping in mind I was doing full-time uni as well, and I was tutoring maths and science around 4 to 6 hours a week on top of that. I still managed to maintain a pretty good social life though, so I was probably working, 45 hours a week, if you include uni as well. I look back really fondly on this period. It was my drinking from the fire hose experience where I just learned so fast, so much, so quickly. I don't think a single day went by where I didn't learn something new. So I'm really grateful for that. And the other thing is, I feel like most students who do internships, the internships can be as little as 4 weeks and about 6 months at most. And I feel like you don't really get the full experience of what it's like to work at a company unless you're there for maybe a year or so. So as a result of that, I feel like a working professional already, just in terms of skill set and understanding of how things get done. So what are my tips for landing something like this? Because I'm sure there's plenty of you who are out there who are curious, how do I do the same thing? Number 1, do everything you can to stand out. If I had to go through this process again, and don't worry, I completely get that the first internship is always the hardest. So I'm with you guys here. But if I had to go through this process again, I'd make a variety of side projects that I could demonstrate. I would up my LinkedIn, make it nice and polished, and make it really clear that I'm looking for an internship. Potentially even reach out to recruiters via LinkedIn. But you want to do it in a way that, you know, other people will be doing similar things. So you kind of want to stand out, and it's kind of up to you to decide how you do that. Because if I give advice and everyone follows it, well, you're no longer standing out, are you? On top of that, I'd check job listings for jobs and internships that looked interesting to me, and look at the things that they require as skills, and then go and learn those skills on my own. It really shows initiative when you can say that you've done that, especially if you can incorporate it into a side project. So for example, if I didn't know any web development and I wanted to do that and add an internship, I'd look up and I'd see on various job postings, okay, they look for React, maybe they look for Angular, maybe they look for Node, maybe they look for C#, things like that. And then I pick a couple and go, I'm going to learn those, and then after you've done that, you're actually qualified to go and apply for those jobs and those internships. You can say, I've done that, especially if you did it as a side project. On top of that, I'd go to a heap of meetups. Meetups have done so much good for me. I think every contract I've landed, and obviously Bluedot as well, have come from meetups. It really depends on the city that you're in, because some cities have more than others. Melbourne's pretty good for that. It's got a decent tech scene, but you know, if you're in San Francisco, you've got so much opportunity there. Most other cities, you'll have at least a few different meetups you can go to. You can meet the people in the tech industry in that area. Go to community practice meetups for things you want to learn. Go to mentoring meetups. Experiment and see what sticks, because I found a few that have been really good that I go to regularly. And what you want to get out of the meetups is two things, and they're both people. Number one is people that you can go to for advice, whether it's advice about how do I land a job in this industry, in this particular city, or it might be advice about how do I learn this particular technology if you find it really hard. They might even be able to teach you. And then the second one is people who have connections. So you need to show your worth first. You can't really just go up to people you've never met and say, give me a job. But there's going to be people who work at companies that you'd be interested in working at, or who know people who do. And they might give you, you know, an insider into that company, which is much more convincing to the hiring managers than just applying through whatever job board you use. Finally though, don't neglect job boards. They can be helpful. So apply for internships through LinkedIn and other job boards. Now, don't be mistaken. This entire process is not linear. It's not you do one, then you do the next thing, you do the next thing, you do the next thing, you're done. Although it might be if you end up getting a job at the end, then that's fantastic. It's a cycle though, because if you fail at the last step, you just go back to the start again. You go, okay, well maybe I need to up my skills again. Or maybe I need to meet more people who can introduce me to other people. And you've got to give back as well. You go, you know, who do I know? Like, you're eventually going to meet people, you're eventually going to acquire skills that you can teach people, that you can introduce people to. And that's where you really start getting that community involvement, and then that's where the goodwill starts coming to you as well. That being said, to do this enough to the point where you can land a job or an internship, it's going to be a couple of months at most if you do it right. If it does take much longer than that, it could be situational, because obviously some cities are really struggling at the moment. This should be a reasonably fast process. It shouldn't be taking you a year. If you go to a dozen meetups, you should meet enough people that it's going to give you an in. But be patient at the same time. So that was number one. Just stand out, meet people, and so on. That's how you do it. Number two though, just keep this in mind when you're applying, when you're going through interviews, and when you're in this internship. It's not about the money. It's about learning as much as you possibly can. I always think in my head, you know, I'm paying myself heaps mentally because of the learning. That's because it's an investment. It's going to come back and compound and pay back later. And finally, number three, don't be afraid of working in a small company. Everyone's got this idea that they want to work at big N, so you know, Facebook, Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Google, whatever. But to be honest, there's perks and disadvantages to both. Especially with startups, there's a lot that they offer that you won't get at a large company. Frantic launches, constant evolution of the product, and rapid growth. That was awesome when I worked at Bluedot. In the time I was there, the company doubled in value, doubled in staff, released a bunch of new features and services, and had all hands meetings every few weeks. You don't get that doubling unless the company is pretty small to start with. The high highs of new investment money coming in and the low lows of struggling to find it, although Bluedot was and is crushing it, so it was definitely mostly the first. Another one for sure, the sense of camaraderie. You've got a tight-knit group of people all moving towards something significant in the same direction, relying on each other's help to get there. We had all the usual trappings of startup life as well. You know, lunches paid for by the company fairly frequently, foosball and chess, sports in the park nearby. Did I mention it was actually right next door to the largest stadium in the Southern Hemisphere, so that was pretty cool. Constant jokes, coffee runs, bosses saying crazy things that HR would throw a fit about in a large company. Just general good vibes, if you will. Beyond that, ultimately, one of the coolest things was feeling like you're a significant and important part of something. Really thought that was pretty awesome. Finally, I just want to give a bit of advice about when it might be time to move on. If you are in an internship or, once you've landed one, there comes a time when you've got to say bye. And a lot of internships have like a built-in expiry date. This goes for 3 months or 6 months. Mine was kind of indefinite. It was, you can stay here as long as you like, because technically it really wasn't an internship from that point. It was like an undergrad position. For me, it was late 2019. I'd been there for about a year and a half, and I'd covered most of the tech stack. I was quickly becoming one of the best React and Node developers at the company, and I felt like I wanted to take some time off to fill in some gaps and learn some technologies that I hadn't used at the company that I wanted to learn. For example, TypeScript, GraphQL, and Vue. On top of that, I really was interested in the idea of consulting for small businesses and building websites and handling digital marketing and things like that, because I felt like that would be a really interesting experience. So I'll make another video on that sometime. But yeah, that was sort of my reasoning. On top of that as well, that next year in uni, I had to do an extra unit on top of my normal ones. So I was going to really stress the idea of working 2 days a week. And for that reason, I figured, well, I may as well quit while I'm ahead, give myself the summer off and just take a break and enjoy it as well. So that was sort of my reasoning for quitting. So I told them I'd finish up after the company hackathon, which is every year. And they said, yeah, that's fine. And so my team and I built a really cool real-time visualizer for the global reach of the product, which was a fantastic way to go out, to be honest. I remember I worked a 13-hour day on my second last day at the company, and I just thought, why not? Let's just build this, let's make this happen. It was really quite fun to do that. All in all, I don't regret quitting when I did. I would have missed out on some things like the hackathon if I had have quit earlier, but I also would have missed out on plenty if I had to quit later, because I ended up doing a whole lot of stuff on my own that I wouldn't have had time for if I was working over summer. Once again, it came down to optimizing for learning. I was offered a 10% raise when I quit, which I could have taken, and I made a bit of extra money, but that wasn't really my goal. And I figured if it was my goal to make as much money as possible, then I had plenty of other options there that wouldn't have been so much, wouldn't have been such a learning experience. But because of the skill set I'd acquired, it was, the market value was quite a bit above what they were really paying. And so really the money didn't faze me all that much, and I thought, you know what, I'm better off quitting, I'm done here, and take the experience in my stride and look back on it fondly, which I do, but definitely just looking forward and thinking about what's next. But yeah, so like I said, I'll make a video about what happened afterwards with the consulting, because that's quite interesting and I'm sure people want to know about that. But in the meantime, thanks for listening to this video. I hope it was helpful, especially if you were a student currently looking for an internship. It really should give you everything you need to go and one. And I'm sure there's also plenty of other people looking here that aren't in that position, so maybe you're someone looking for a career switch, in which case this advice may need a bit of adaptation, but it's still applicable to your situation, I'd say. And finally, I just want to say a big thank you to Bluedot for giving me this experience and sort of taking me under their wing when there was really no proof that I was actually going to be able to, even really do the work. All they had to go off was a really small project, but it definitely did set the career in a trajectory that I've kept it going and I'm really enjoying so far. But yeah, thank you for that. Anyway, I'll catch you all in the next video. See ya.